Hi, my name's Christy and it's my pleasure to read the Bible for us tonight. Please turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 9. A common destiny for all. So I reflected on all this and concluded that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands, but no one knows whether love or hate awaits them. All share a common destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. As it is with the good, so with the sinful. As it is with those who take oaths, so with those who are afraid to take them. This is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes all. The hearts of people, moreover, are full of evil, and there is madness in their hearts while they live, and afterward they join the dead. Anyone who is among the living has hope. Even a live dog is better off than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even their name is forgotten. Their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun. Go, eat your food with gladness, and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for in the realm of the dead, where you are going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no one knows when the hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so people are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. Wisdom better than folly. I also saw under the sun this example of wisdom that greatly impressed me. There was once a small city with only a few people in it, and a powerful king came against it, surrounded it, and built huge siege works against it. Now, therein lived in that city a man poor but wise, and he saved the city by his wisdom. But nobody remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than strength. But the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are no longer heeded. The quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouts of a ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good.
Thanks so much for reading that so well, Christy. That's an amazing passage, an amazing one, an amazing book. I'm going to pray briefly, and then we're going to think about what this might mean for us tonight. Father, we ask you to speak to us. We thank you for the radical wisdom here and the amazing thinking of this writer, but we ask, Lord, that you would help us consider things we haven't thought about before and maybe haven't had the courage to think about. We ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, it's good to pray. I reckon God answers prayers more than you might think. Struggling with the Bible, I encourage you to ask God for help. So here's the thing. Anyone like chess? Who likes chess? I love chess. And I go in phases where I get obsessed with the game, get my chess books out, read up on how to win and how to play better, put the board out until Lockie beats me, and then I put it away again for a few years. Do it again every now and again. That's what I do. But you see, when I was watching chess as a young kid, Garry Kasparov, have you heard that name? One of the amazing players of history. In his peak, there was a computer called, what's it called again? Deep Blue, that was, they were saying an algorithm was going to be created to beat Garry Kasparov. And people said, no way. But in 1986, Deep Blue actually beat Garry Kasparov in a chess match. And this is how they describe what the computer did in the match. They said the computer did one thing and one thing only. It played chess by evaluating 200 million board positions per second. Pretty impressive, right? 200 million board positions every second was required for that computer to play so well. Can you just imagine that? And that's just the complexity of a game of chess. Right? Now, as complex as you might think a game of chess might be, just think about this, how much more complex is actually the game of life? Chess is actually simplistic compared to life. And so as amazing it might be that you think, wow, there can be 200 million different board positions a second in a game of chess, how much more complexity per second is there actually in real life? Where the results aren't the question of whether you win or lose a game, but whether you win or lose at life. The book of Ecclesiastes is asking big questions about life. It's a book of wisdom about life, but not neat wisdom. It's not wisdom that sort of says, look, if you work hard, you won't be poor. It's not that sort of wisdom. It's radical wisdom. The writer is asking more difficult questions, all the way actually giving you more questions than answers, wanting you to think through your approach to life. So like the book of Job, what happens when you're good and it all goes bad? That's the type of questions he asks. Ecclesiastes is a Latin translation of the Hebrew word for teacher, the name given to this wise teacher, the one who brings together the ecclesia, the people of God. So the whole book is set up around this image of the people of God coming to hear the wisdom of this writer. Radical wisdom. And his main question that you see spanning across the book, in verse 3 of the whole book, he asks this: what do people gain from their labours at which they toil under the sun? Very important. This frames his whole thing. The word under the sun is his code word, happens 5 times in our passage. It's like code for this life. So he's saying, if this life is all there is, does it actually work? His question, what's to be gained? It's an economic term that means what is left over of lasting value when it's all said and done? When you finish doing all that you're going to do, is there anything of value left? So in basic terms, if this is all there is it worth it? That's his actually exploration. And it's very important you to understand. It's not life above the sun, not life beyond the sun. It's like John Lennon's vision. Imagine there's no heaven, no hell, no eternity, just living for today. And you have to, if you get that, it actually starts to make sense. A lot of people dismiss this book because they feel like they read it and go, oh, that's wrong. But this writer couldn't be more right when you understand what he's doing. You know, the people of Israel, by tradition, would have this read at the most celebratory feast of their annual feasts. So at the high point, they read the text that is the most sobering. This is really, really good wisdom. But it's the only book in the Bible written from the point of view of a skeptic. And you've got to get that. Otherwise, you're going to read it and think, oh, because see, verse 5, he says, for example, the dead know nothing. He says in multiple places, there's nothing after death. But you know, the rest of the Bible, if you know anything about it, has other things to say about that. So all the things he says are because he's taking this idea of, is this all there is, and is it worth it if it is? Does it work if this is all there is? He's taken that for a test drive. He's taken the idea, that philosophy. You're all philosophers. You've all got an approach to life. You all have a way you see reality. This guy wants you to take your way of life for a test drive. And it couldn't be more modern because he's like the average Aussie, right? He's actually not an atheist. The name God, the word God, comes multiple times through the book and in our chapter. So he's not a philosophical atheist. He says actually this meaningless life was given by God. But he's like the average Aussie that might be like very pragmatic, but honest enough to say, look, I don't know if there's a God or not. If there is, how do we know which one and what they say? I don't know where I come from, where I'm going, but I guess this is all we got. Right? It's a very relevant book today. So he's taken that idea for a test drive, and we've been seeing that. He takes for a test drive what we do when we think there's no greater purpose to the world. If we think this is all an accident, it's just a crapshoot, you're just grown-up germs, and you die and rot, we usually base our lives on particular things. So he's taken for a test drive already. What's it look like? What's to be gained if you make work the organising principle of your life? He asked, what's to be gained if you make pleasure the organising principle of your life? What's to be gained if you want to make a difference, impact the world, and make that the organising principle of your life? He says, does it actually work? But tonight he's going to ask a big question. So he asks questions like, what's it worth doing with my life? What will satisfy me? And the question for tonight is, what do you do about injustice? What do you do about things that are not right in the world? That's the big question tonight that he's going to ask you to be honest about. And there's really two things he does here that I want you to notice today. The first heading is he gets in your face about injustice. And the second thing, he helps us begin to deal with injustice in two ways. First thing, he gets in our face about injustice and then helps us deal with it. So the first thing, he gets in your face about it. And you'll notice in every chapter, the looming reality of death is like the shadow over the whole chapter. It's always sitting there, and for him renders everything meaningless. You'll notice he says in verse 2, all share a common destiny. Verse 3, the same destiny overtakes all. At the end of the verse, we all join the dead. Verse 5, for the living know they're going to die. Right, so this idea of death is always on his mind. And you and I, James challenged us a few weeks ago, we don't like thinking about death, do we? We actually, I think, have an avoidance language about death. Think of your legal contracts. They often say things like, if something should happen to you, ... If something will happen to you. But we have like a distancing language from the idea. And we do this especially in our airline companies, right? They make the little announcement before the plane takes off, and they'll say things like, in the unlikely event of landing upon the water. You think, okay, you've got this tons of machinery travelling hundreds of miles an hour. You better believe it's an unlikely event that this thing's actually going to land itself on water. I watch the movies. You know, it doesn't go good, that stuff. We have our defence mechanism, don't you, about death? You don't like it. Paul Simon in Garfunkel, his famous song. Listen to this chorus. So I'll continue to pretend that my life will never end and the flowers never bend with the rainfall. I'll continue to pretend that my life will never end and the flowers never bend with the rainfall. Every kid knows flowers do move with the rain. Woody Allen said, it's not that I'm afraid to die, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Right? So the first thing is in your face. It's a reality check. He wants you to face reality about your destiny. But the bigger issue in our chapter is injustice. So let's look at verse 11 and his conclusion here. This is very important to notice. He says, I've seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favour to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no one knows when their hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so people are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. Time and chance, he says, it is a random, it's a crapshoot. Who knows? He's saying it seems so random, but it also doesn't seem right. This is huge what the writer's trying to say. And he wants you, whether you're a Christian or not, to be honest about things that don't seem right. It doesn't go to the swift. You might be swift, but you might lose. This morning, I just randomly went through a whole bunch of news headlines for articles. Have a listen to this. First article, are we heading towards another COVID Christmas? Man bashed in Perth. Sydney woman dies in tragic accident on the way to work. Charlie, aged 6, found dead in her Adelaide home. Woman started house fire, films and takes photos of it, doesn't ring the police, and her neighbourly couple and their baby die, burnt to death. Thousands of Iranians have protested security forces unlawfully killing 66 people at the end of September. The Middle East, terrorists commandeered a school bus, blow it up and take their own lives. And thousands of children die every day from preventable diseases. See, this is what the Ecclesiastes writer is trying to say. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you are, horrible things happen and no one knows when. You just don't know when it's going to happen. Can we be honest? I know we're in church, but can we be honest about the fact that, hey, we just don't know what's going to happen next? You don't. And he says, the race isn't to the swift. You might be fast, but you may lose. It seems random. So if you think, look, I'm just not going to catch buses in the Middle East, I'm going to do 1, 2 and 3, my life's going to be fine. If you genuinely believe that, you're young. It's only a matter of time because you'll start to realise it doesn't actually play out like that all the time. You might think you're in control, but actually you never were. So he firstly covers the random thing. Look at the first verse again. So I reflected on all this, 9 verse 1, and concluded that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands. But here's the thing, but no one knows whether love or hate awaits them, right? There's random things. None of you know what's going to happen next. No matter how smart you think you are, how routine you think you are, you just don't know. Could you acknowledge what the writer's saying? But then he moves to something that's not random, that is true for all of us. Second verse, we all share a common destiny. The righteous, the wicked, the good, the bad, the clean, the unclean, those who offer sacrifices, those who don't. I want you to notice verse 5 and 6. And what he says here, no one says. No one has the courage to say this who believes that this is all there is. But listen to this. For the living know that they will die, the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even their name is forgotten. Their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun. Did you hear that? Whether you live a life of love or hate, verse 6. Did you notice that? It's all going to vanish. He's putting you on the same level. Whether you live a love or hate life, like whether you're the arsonist or the kid that got burned up in the house fire, it's all going to vanish. Your life's going to vanish. Every memory of everything you've done will be completely forgotten. He's saying in the end, if this is all there is, we're going into some huge, sort of cosmic nothingness pit. That's it. The question still stands. What do you do about it? Literally, how do you deal with those problems, the injustice of that? I've read something of a book called The Tall Man by a person called Lady Chloe Hooper. She's actually writes in various genres, but she's here as a reporter. The subtitle, Death and Life on Palm Island. She talks about a death in custody of an Indigenous person in Northern Australia, a man called Cameron Dumadji. She is impressive in the interviews she does. Experts, authorities, locals, people involved, people on the fringe. And she says, there is literally no sense here. All I can tell you is something shouldn't have happened that happened. And nothing was done about it. There was an injustice. What do you do about injustice? What do you do for those who struggle with injustice? What do you do when there's injustice in your country, in your family, in your neighbourhood, in your friend's life? What about your life? And what do you say to people when they're struggling with injustice? I remember this, and I often get emotional thinking about it. One of my early jobs as a music teacher, I went to living skills centres as the music guy, and I'd take a guitar, a Beatles songbook, and we'd play songs for an hour. Or we'd get out instruments, or we'd just do music. And for months when I first started that job, I was so sobered because all these amazingly gifted human beings, my age and older, they had a life that was lost. They had family, they had spouses, they had kids that they were separated from because of mental illness. And literally that's it. They don't see any way out of where they are. We had concert pianists. I had one lady who she was manic depressive, and she would sit on the piano and come to life and play amazing boogie woogie piano, like to perfection, and then hop off and rock and couldn't talk to anyone. I came away going, there's something, this is not the way it ought to be type thing. What do you do with stuff that is confounding, that you don't know what to do about? You know what we often do for our friends? We say, let's go for a walk. Let's go buy a new dress. Let's go to the beach. Let's go to a good restaurant. Let's go out and treat yourself on the town. Let's calm down a bit. Isn't that what we do? Trying to help and everything. And he knows this is what we do. Because look at verse 7. He says, go eat your food with gladness. Drink your wine with a joyful heart. For God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed with white. Always anoint your head with oil. Look good. Feel good. Dress up. Do what you like. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun. All your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life and in your toilsome labour under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For the realm of the dead, where you're actually going, there is neither working nor planning nor knowledge nor wisdom. Yeah, go for it. Try to distract yourself with those things. In other words, eventually, the truth's still going to poke through. What do you do about it? So what he's really saying in this getting in your face about injustice, and he's saying, do not tune out injustice. Don't tune it out. Can I ask just a very simple practical question? How do you watch the news? Do you watch the news? And if you do, how do you actually watch the thing? If you watch the news in the morning, lunch, afternoon, evening, late night, you know what? You're trained. You are literally trained every time you watch the news to disassociate with what you're hearing. You'll have tragic circumstance. 30 seconds later, another bad news, another article, and then a couple of ads, some good things you can buy. Then, and go on a holiday. And then another bad thing, maybe a feel-good story and another bunch of ads. You get 30 seconds to a minute on a piece, and then you're off to the next thing. I can't go 2 or 3 segments and I have to turn it off and start processing what I've heard. If there's floods in Australia, if there's tragedy overseas, if there's, a girl who was burnt up with her parents because someone lit the apartment on fire, if you don't actually deal with it. So, side Bible note. 3 things about this. Don't tune out injustice. The Bible's going to say grieve injustice. Jesus wept at the death of his friend. He wept over Jerusalem. He was called the man of sorrows. Grieve injustice. But don't get caught up in despair over it either. That's the Bible. Don't tune it out. Grieve it. But don't get stuck in despair with it. So our writer has been trying to get in your face about injustice. Do not tune this out. Whether you think this is all there is or whether you believe in Jesus, doesn't matter. Don't tune the thing out. But now he's going to help us begin to deal with it. And his incredible wisdom, his logic is profound here. Remember, he's assessing the possibility. Does it work if you do life as though this is all there is and you die and that's it? Does that work? And so I'm going to read now verse 4 where he begins to challenge if that actually works. What I love about this guy, he doesn't just challenge belief, he challenges unbelief. If I make a statement from here, I'm standing somewhere, he challenges where he's standing. In other words, this guy has got the integrity to doubt his doubts. This is very important wisdom. So look at verse 4. Anyone who is among the living has hope, right? Because as far as he's concerned, there's nothing after that. And that's his context. Okay. But then he says, even a live dog is better than a dead lion. Even a live dog is better than a dead lion. Now, profound maybe. It's deep. What the heck does that thing mean? A live dog is better than a dead lion. So here's the problem. When you think of dog, you think poodle, Labrador, Alsatian, border collie. You think beautiful, cuddly, lovely animal. Pet. Not ancient people. They were a disgusting, hated animal. They were scavengers, they were wild, and they fed on the carcasses of dead animals. That's what dogs were. They were actually discarded. And there's a contrast between this scavenging dog and the noble lion, the king of all beasts, the lion. I'm trying to be sensitive. Look, I know there's a lot of dog lovers in the room, actually a lot of dog lovers in my own house now. Trying to be sensitive. But ancient people discarded the dog, honoured the lion. He says, better to be a live dog than actually a dead lion. What's he trying to say to you? This is huge what he's saying. I don't think many people have the courage to say this, but he's saying it's better to be a scavenging, lying murderer who's saved their own skin than a noble person who's actually dead because of it. He's saying if this is actually all there is, better to save your butt, Who cares how you live? If you're a crook and you can save your skin, good on you, rather than be right, be good and die for that. Not worth it if this is all there is. Who says that? Verse 5 says the word for. This is the reason why he said it. Just take note of his wisdom. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even their name is forgotten. Their love, their hate, their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun. Vanished, forgotten. That's the end of everyone. Basically, he says, whether your life is a life of love or a life of hate, it's going to vanish. And here's the thing, if we are accidents, if you're just grown-up germs and you die and you rot, how do you assess actually right and wrong? Can you? If there's actually no purpose to life, how can you? Basically, what he's trying to tell you here, there is no such thing as abstract goodness. It doesn't exist. Goodness is always tied to purpose. So let me give you an example. If you'd never seen a phone before, and I gave you a phone and said, hey, here's a phone. What do you think of it? Do you reckon it's good? How do you answer that? Literally, quite frankly, how do you work it out? You try to beat a nail in a wall, try to screw a hole. You can't work out if this thing is good or bad unless you know why it was created, why it was made. Then you can decide if it's good or bad. It's very bad at hammering nails, but it wasn't made for hammering nails, right? So here's the thing. Good or bad, there's no goodness or badness apart from purpose. And so what he's saying is, if we're all accidents and all we're here to do is survive, he's saying you're no different to animals. He said that in chapter 3. You and animals, no different. You breathe the same air, you go to the same place. And actually stop and think about this with our country and the values or ideals of our society. Our society believes, well, the first, Western generation is really amazing. These 200 years, there's been no other society in history that's believed this is all there is. But one of the outcomes is the changing of value systems. And so you'll give more value to the eggs of a sea turtle than you will to a human fetus. That's one of the realities in a society that has the idea there's no purpose. You just create your own purpose. You create your own meaning. But here's the problem. And this is the real problem where he goes expert on us. The reality is you still want more even if you think this is all there is. Why is it that we sense moral obligation? Why is it that there's some things that you go, no matter what you think or feel, that was wrong? Commandeering a bus and blowing up kids, that's evil. I think most people in Australia will go, why do people say that? If we think there's no purpose to anything and there's nothing after you die. Why do we dream for something we've never known? You and I have never known a world without hate, without violence, but we all dream for a place that has hope, has equity, has peace, don't we? Why is it that you long for things that you've never known? You've never known a world that doesn't have war, but how come your soul longs for a world without war? I think it's intrinsic evidence that there's a creator behind it all. That your life is made for more than this and you have purpose and you want for things that this world can't satisfy. And he shows it. He models this problem because he's recognizing, hey, doesn't matter. But then in verse 3 he says, but it does matter. Look at verse 3. He says, this is the evil in everything that happens. He says the hearts of people are full of evil. So first he says, it doesn't matter how you live. You can be noble or be a crook, who cares? Just save your skin. But then he says some things are wrong. See, we're in a quandary here. That's not logically in line. And he's saying this is one of the problems with the idea that this is all there is. You just know some things are right and wrong, but you haven't got a reason, a basis for it. So I might say, look, I I struggle. You might be someone who goes, I struggle to believe in God because of all the injustice in the world. But now he's saying, but if there's no God, I've got no basis for my outrage anymore. Tim Keller says, evil is a problem for belief in God, but it's a bigger problem for unbelief in God. Because if you think something's evil, it's a pointer that this is not all there is. It's a pointer there's actually a God. And only Christianity gives you verse 13 and on. Only Christianity gives you the next few verses to deal with injustice. No one else does. No other writer of wisdom in antiquity gives you what's next. Let me read from verse 13. It says, I also saw under the sun this example of wisdom that greatly impressed me. That actually means that confounded me, that was beyond me. Every time I get a chance for our young people to go through this book, I always teach these couple of verses on their own. They are the most profound thing, I think, in the book. Verse 14, there once was a small city, only with a few people in it, and a powerful king came against it, surrounded it, and built huge siege works against it. Now there lived in that city a man, poor but wise, and he saved the city by his wisdom, but nobody remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than strength, but the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are no longer heeded. I want you to notice this is an amazing, amazing account. This guy, he's confounded. This is wisdom that's beyond him. And just stop and notice it. You're actually encouraged in the whole book to think about King Solomon, the wise king. But think about it. King Solomon was full of power, prestige, position, wealth. Does he actually, when he makes wise, apparently uses his wisdom, how would he know it's wisdom at work or not? How does he know it's not because of his influence, his wealth, his power, his position? What you have here is a story where the only thing that created difference, that was a saving element, was wisdom. So you've got wisdom in bright neon lights here that Solomon, or this writer is saying, he has never experienced. It's just raw wisdom. That's the first thing. And he notices how powerful it is, despite the overwhelming odds. So you've got small city, few people, great king, and powerful army around it. And so you've actually got 5 elements, by the way, that everyone has to face in life. This poor man, a small city, he deals with a sense of overwhelming insignificance, overwhelming circumstances, lack of resources, lack of position, and lack of recognition. Basically, they're 5 things that every human being has to deal with. At times, you'll deal with a lack of significance, overwhelming circumstances, lack of position, lack of power, lack of resources, and lack of recognition. And a good thing to ask yourself in light of this, what am I willing to do for other people if no one was to know? We have a poor man, all the odds are against him, yet his wisdom is a saving wisdom. It saves a city. The second thing he realises, that this guy's wisdom wasn't for himself, but was there for others. First thing, it's actually odd that this guy's poor. We have an image in our book of a wise teacher who's got wealth and is king. How can you be wise and poor? Because if you're wise, you know how to get ahead in life. You know how to create wealth, really, if you're wise. How can you be wise but poor? See, he's confronted with the reality that this wisest of men doesn't use his wisdom to dominate or to get himself ahead in life, but to help others. Not just that. It's not just they forgot him, like he says, everyone else they're going to forget what you do. But he says they despised him, they hated him, they rejected his words and teaching. Let's be honest. Who do you think about when you hear this story? Poor man, full of wisdom, becomes a saviour, and his life and teaching is rejected. Jesus Christ. And one of the amazing things about this is read, scholars say, it just reads like ancient prophecy. This is a little anecdote that points way beyond itself and helps us see the one who's going to come, the true poor man who's wise, who Paul describes as Christ crucified. Christ crucified, stumbling block to Jews, foolishness to Greeks, but Paul says Jesus is the wisdom and the power of God. So in other words, here's the thing. This is what God does when it comes to injustice. God is not in heaven saying, deal with it. He doesn't just say, just suck it up. Life sucks and then you die. That's not what God does. Just think about the ultimate injustice. The one who created everything, who gave us life and breath, is forgotten and then treated so unjustly. When he comes to try to actually reconcile us to him, offer forgiveness, we kill him. And we mock and shame him in the process. How unjust is that? So can I ask you, as you stop to think about injustice, truth relates to what is. Injustice relates to what ought to be. And Jesus coming is, Isaiah says, an act of reconciling justice, making things the way they ought to be, where we can know God. But the problem is we forget him. Can we just be honest in the room? We are expert forgetters of God. You are so good at just edging God out, distracting yourself, not wanting to think about him, just forgetting. How many times a day or a week do you go, oh yeah, it's not just me, it's God too? Your perspective needs to broaden. How often does that happen, no matter how long you've been a Christian? We are expert forgetters. Psalmist says, bless the Lord, O my soul, bless the Lord, and forget not all his benefits. That writer's saying, my biggest issue is I'm always forgetting God. And the reality is, I think when you think about the implications for us, when we turn away from the only permanent one who is forever, we become more temporary, more forgettable. And isn't the worst thing for you to be forgotten? Isn't the most difficult thing in life when you're overlooked, when you're ignored, when you're not honoured or recognised? But you see, when Jesus is on the cross, he's crying out, my God, why do you forget me? Why do you forsake me? See, when it comes to injustice, God doesn't say, listen, I'm going to give you an amazing argument to deal with. He goes, I'm going to give you an amazing person. Jesus actually experienced this ultimate forgottenness, so you will never be forgotten. And so when it comes to injustice, there's so much you and I don't know. There's so much you'll never know about why this happened, why that didn't happen. But what we do know, it's not because he doesn't love us. And that's the change agent here. Isaiah says, can a mother forget her child? Even if she does, God says, I will never forget you. I've carved your names on the palm of my hands. You're going to be remembered and loved forever. I guess my question for you is, how deep does that get to sink in? I bet when I started saying how you forget God and I forget God, I bet most of us go, oh yeah, I'm crummy at that. All of us, right? But so often we get into this thing where we actually move the gospel off. We've just heard the gospel, but so often it doesn't frame all your reflections. So often we just kick it off and get rid of it. I want to encourage you that God is not getting you to beat your head and go, you idiot. Do you let it sink in a little bit more tonight that the one who should never have been forgotten allowed himself to be treated the most unjustly, so you'll never be forgotten? What would it mean for that to sink a bit deeper? Because that's the gospel. When I ask you to reflect on being honest about forgetting God, it's helping you remember he's done something so he'll never forget you. If you give your life to him, you got him. Like Red said, he's never going to give you up or leave you. Are you willing to reflect on the problem of injustice, though? If you're a follower of Christ, are you willing to reflect for a second? Because this is helping us see the fact that our inner life is connected to a life of justice. Any saint worthy of recognition, any Christian in history, always highlighted a couple of key practices: silence, solitude, and fasting, that a person might become more open and available to God and others, more able to enact justice in the world. Just think about solitude and silence. The idea of solitude, of getting out on your own and stopping and thinking. Or the idea of silence, of not reacting all the time verbally to everything, having a space where you're trying not to do that, because you begin to become more open to the Lord and open to others. And just reflect on one thing. Can you reflect on it without kicking the gospel off? Remember, God was forgotten so we can do this and actually change. So he's never going to forget you. But you know what? Think about these little babies. They're amazing, right? I've got a new one. It's huge. I can't fit it in my pocket. I hate it, but it's good, right? It's amazing. It's better than the last one. It works. Screen's not busted. But here's the thing. I won't leave this room without it in my pocket. I won't get in my car tonight without knowing it's in the car on the thing. I won't go in the house without taking it with me. I look at this glowing rectangle when I go to sleep. It's the last thing I look at. It's the first thing I look at when I wake up. We actually let it affect all our interactions, our relationships. You know how often you socially have this etiquette now? Oh, hold on a second, hold on. Yeah, no, what's, yeah, and we keep talking. You know how often that keeps our conversations at this level where they could have gone to that level, but there's that little interruption. What were we talking about? It's actually amazing. I'm not saying we should get rid of these, but if I'm going to think about forgetting God and the fact that spending time alone and sometimes more quietly is going to help me not forget God, if that's true, I've got to deal with this a bit, haven't I? We really do. If you've got a young family, I encourage you to read Andy Crouch's book, Tech-Wise Family. He opens up their struggle as a family and his approach, and after many years he says what we do now, it's a pattern for them, 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, and for a bit of an extended time a year, we sort of unplug somehow. We make sure it's not next to us. For them, it's often dinner and the phone is literally not on their body and they're not answering them. There's $25 in the jar if you do. We've threatened our kids, but we never charge them because we're the ones trying to, That's the thing. Us adults, I want to say, you guys who are under 20, I think we have a bigger problem because we beat you around the head. Get off your phone, but we're on it just as much. And I'm not saying that's the problem. I'm saying, what would it mean for you to reflect on engaging with God more? Because it's connected to justice. The phrase Paul uses to summarize the Christian life is the ministry of reconciliation. The same thing Jesus did for us. That's actually the all-encompassing summary of the Christian life. We're helping reconcile things to the way they ought to be. You can never separate Jesus from the idea of justice, the way things ought to be. That's your role in life, whatever it is. If you help out with, say, a midweek group, say Brigades Ministry, Thursday nights here, you create a space where some young people can begin to make stronger friendships and show love and kindness to each other. You're actually beginning to reconcile all things to the way they ought to be. You want to be a youth group leader and you create you're working with your group to actually begin to reflect more deeply about life and God together. So that what? Well, it doesn't matter, what might be at work, might be as an employer, that I am going to actually work hard for equity and care of my employees because I'm trying to move things to the way they ought to be. It doesn't matter what sphere you're in, education, services, it doesn't matter. But you have the ministry of reconciliation because of God's reconciling work with you. And that's actually an act of justice, how things ought to be. So I hope you've been challenged to not tune out justice and to begin to deal with injustice. Let me pray, and we're going to invite our amazing musicians to come and serve us again. Father God, thanks for tonight and thanks for your word, and we ask that you would help us reflect honestly about our approach to life. And the reality is so often we just go ahead without thinking. I thank you that you were willing to be forgotten so we wouldn't be. And we ask that if we're wanting to make changes in our life, that we make them out of joy, because that's amazing. There's nothing better than that news. We thank you that this is not all there is. We thank you for the wisdom of this writer who said everything's meaningless, but because Jesus came and stepped into the meaninglessness himself, we know, Lord, that everything is now meaningful, that nothing isn't meaningless, that even every heartache is actually full of meaning. We ask, Lord, that you would change our perspective of what it means to know you and to have this ministry of reconciling things to the way they ought to be. Thank you for what you've done for us through Jesus. Amen.